Proportional Response. Book 1, Chapter 21, Part 1, The Fields of Battle. Goyap flexed the webbing on his hands reflexively and regretted it instantly. The skin cracked a little, and plasma began to seep from the wounds. At least that will moisturize the skin a little, the Arabso thought to himself. 5 days on this dry dust bowl of a plane, and nothing to show for it. I hope the Major has some sort of plan, because it doesn't seem like Command does, and if we don't get to some water soon, we're going to be in trouble. Half the guys have cracking skin even worse than me. He threw some more dirt over the back of his neck, anything to keep the sun off and a little more moisture in as he peered over the edge of the pit the company had dug to hole up for the day. Renter, another of the corporals, crawled up to him and handed him a ration of water. Renter looked caught him, considering dribbling a little on his hands, and gave him a hard look. Don't. I've orders to tell the Major if anyone tries to do anything with their ration, but drink it. Please, don't make... Goyap waved a hand and took a sip of the precious water. I know, I won't. This stuff is far too precious to even consider it, and half of whatever I pour out would get sucked up by this damned dust. He shook his head and looked out over the edge of the hole again. Any word on what the hell is going on? The Major has been tight-lipped, and none of the officers even seem to know. Renter looked around and then leaned in and spoke with venom. We are fucked. That's what is going on. Some idiot at Allied Command screwed up some orders and got us sent here to some depth-forsaken Thermican dust bowl, rather than to one of our own occupied worlds where we could pull the damned lizards under the water and drown them like civilized soldiers. Then someone else cocked up and gave our pilot the coordinates for a supply drop intended for gods alone knows who, and our coordinates to the pilot for said supply drop. Supply drop pilot had the brains to web-foot it back to the fleet, but not the Major. Goyap blinked first his inner, then his outer eyelids at Renter. So that is what the shouting was about when we landed. Yup, Captain trying to tell the Major our mission was a bus, that we didn't have the water to make the trek and be in fighting shape when it was done. Major. Well, you know how he claimed he'd be promoted to Lieutenant Colonel before we hit 6 months into the war. Well, we are already a month in, and he has yet to have a solid military victory to show for it. Command keeps sending us to after-action zones to act as peacekeeping and looting prevention. Goyap nodded. No fault of the men in the unit, but he knows that. I can't imagine why. I mean, it is almost like someone at high command realizes that the Major is too gung-ho for his own good, much less the good of the unit, and is likely to do something stupid if given half a chance. Renter rolled one eye in a small circle to denote further sarcasm. Yes, like taking a bunch of men with 3 days' worth of water on a 5-day march across a desolate, dusty plain to hit a supply depot, rather than letting them ride the transport back up to fleet. It gets worse than that, though. Renter looked around with both eyes going in opposite directions, leaned in close, and spoke in a near whisper. I hear that Fleet Command told the Major to stay put and dig in when the transport got back, and they would drop supplies for us. With us on the move, however, they can't risk it. Goyap narrowed his eyes to slits. The Major is disobeying a direct order from Fleet Command. Why hasn't the Captain? Renter had begun looking about nervously, presumably realizing he'd said more than he should, but the man's darting eyes suddenly fixated on a single point near the horizon. Something about the youngster's expression caused Goyap to turn both his eyes and look the same way, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A cloud of dust rising up from the plane, obviously headed their way. Goyap strained his eyes for a moment, then pulled up his binoculars and zoomed in. When the image resolved, he cursed under his breath. Sultans, and definitely headed straight for them. He watched them for a few moments, getting a count and an estimate of distance and speed. They had very little time. Without a word to Renter, he somersaulted backwards and crawled as quickly as he could to the command position where the Captain and the Major sat listening to Fleet Comm. They both saw him at the same time, and the Major gave him an angry look. But the Captain managed to speak first. If you are here, instead of on your watch, you best have something to report. Goyap moved his eyes up and down to indicate he did, and a waved hand told him to proceed. Zoltans, sir, a lot of them. The dust made them a little hard to count, but they have at least twice the numbers we do, and they will be here soon. I estimate 40 to 50 minutes. The captain reached for the comms gear, but the major simply gave a wide, wicked smile and said, "Good." The captain turned bodily to face his commanding officer and moved one eye in disbelief. The major ignored the man and continued, "We have an entrenched position and a full stock of ammunition. Furthermore, with the warning, we have the chance to dig a little more and plant a few surprises out there for—" The captain waved at the major to cut him off. "Sir, with respect, may I have a word with you in private?" The major lifted one side of his mouth in a sneer and turned a single eye contemptuously to the captain. "No, Captain. There's no time to sit around and debate while the river flows by us. We must prepare. Major, I asked you to have this conversation with me privately. I want that on record. Now I will tell you, I cannot in good conscience follow those orders. We are outnumbered by a fresh force who obviously knows our position. To try to take them on is suicide, not glory. Even if we win, we'll lose many, if not most, of the men. There are allied forces in this area. We need to call for help." The major looked briefly at the captain with half-closed eyes, then turned his eyes to one of the MPs. "Sergeant, put this man in irons for insubordination." The captain closed his eyes and spoke in a calm, hard tone. "Belay that order, Sergeant. Major, you have acted against direct orders too many times, and your current orders are in contravention of the General's direct order to avoid combat if possible, and call for reinforcements if it is not. You are taking this action for reasons of personal gain rather than military need, and sacrificing the lives of our men in doing so. Under Article 7, Paragraph 6 of the Military Code, I am relieving you of command. Sergeant, please put the major in irons. Private, please hand me that comms unit." No one moved for a few moments, and Goyap held his breath. Life and death for me and the entire company, right here and now. The major turned and pointed at the MP, yelling at him to arrest the captain. The MP looked at each with one of his eyes, then focused both eyes on the major and started to move forward. Then the major reached for his sidearm. Time seemed to slow for Goyap. The major's hand started moving towards his pistol. The MP's hands began to come up, and the captain started, too late, as Goyap could see, to reach for his own pistol. If the major gets that shot off, I am a dead man. He didn't so much think it as feel it in a blast of fear that started at his eyes and went straight down to his hand. That hand responded to the fear by lashing out, seeming to Goyap to move at casual speed while everyone else moved through jelly, and impacted the major square in the teeth. The officer's head bent slightly in something that would have looked like a nod for a human, but risked dangerous injury for an Arab so. The major's hand stopped moving towards his gun, and time resumed its normal pace. Before the major's head had even finished moving, the captain had his own gun out and pointed directly at the major's left eye.